The volatile geopolitical landscape of South Asia is once again on the brink of dramatic upheaval. 4 years after the United States withdrawal, Afghanistan finds itself precariously close to open conflict. However, this time, the adversary is not a distant superpower, but a considerably more powerful neighbor to its southeast, Pakistan. In recent days, the simmering tensions between Afghanistan and Pakistan have erupted into multiple rounds of deadly border violence, threatening to unravel the fragile stability of the region. While the full human toll remains unconfirmed, reports suggest hundreds may have already perished. With Pakistan conducting airstrikes deep within Afghan territory, and Afghan forces mobilizing tanks towards the border, a fragile ceasefire is set to expire, casting a long shadow over the prospect of peace. This marks the second time in the current year that nuclear-armed Pakistan has engaged in an escalating conflict with a neighboring state, raising grave concerns about the potential for widespread devastation. To comprehend the complexities of the current crisis, it is essential to distinguish between two distinct entities: the Afghan Taliban, which has governed Afghanistan since the 2021 withdrawal, and the Pakistani Taliban, often referred to as Tehrik-i-Taliban Pakistan (TTP). Currently, the TTP operates much like the Afghan Taliban did in its insurgent phase, an asymmetric force, skillfully hiding in the rugged terrain and blending seamlessly with the local Pashtun population across the region. From these clandestine positions, they launch unpredictable, often devastating, attacks. Officially, the Afghan Taliban maintains that it is a separate entity from the TTP and denies providing any support to the group, which regularly targets Pakistan's military, internal security forces, and civilians. However, the TTP frequently seeks safe haven across the Afghan border, and independent analysts widely believe they receive backing from their Afghan counterparts. Pakistan consistently dismisses Afghanistan's denials, asserting that the Afghan Taliban actively supports the TTP, allegedly with financial assistance from Pakistan's geopolitical rival, India. This divergence of claims forms a significant point of contention between Islamabad and Kabul, undermining any trust between the two governments and maintaining a precarious state of peace. The current regional breakdown began on October 8, when a Pakistani military convoy traveling near the Afghan border was ambushed by the TTP. The attack involved multiple roadside bomb blasts followed by a fierce gun battle, resulting in the deaths of 11 Pakistani personnel, including several officers. While initial Pakistani reports offered a different account, evidence now supports the TTP's claim of responsibility for the ambush. The following day, October 9, Pakistan reportedly retaliated with an airstrike in Kabul, allegedly targeting the longtime leader of the TTP. Pakistan denies its involvement, and unverified audio recordings suggest the leader survived the attack. However, multiple senior TTP members were reportedly killed, and Pakistan allegedly conducted additional airstrikes in other parts of Afghanistan. In swift retaliation, the TTP launched further attacks, killing 7 police officers at a training academy and 11 soldiers in another convoy ambush. A third attack resulted in the deaths of 3 civilians and 2 paramilitary fighters allied with Pakistan's government in the Bajaur district. Simultaneously, Pakistan reported multiple raids on TTP hideouts in the same vicinity as the initial convoy ambush, claiming the lives of 30 insurgent fighters. By the early hours of October 11 into October 12, it was evident that regions where the TTP held significant influence were teetering on the brink of chaos. However, it was the Afghan Taliban, not the TTP, that initiated offensive action on that night. Moving covertly across a disputed border zone, Afghan Taliban units launched a series of retaliatory attacks, ostensibly in response to Pakistan's alleged airstrikes in Kabul. Led by a veteran fighter, Afghan forces reportedly attacked multiple military posts, claiming to inflict heavy casualties and capture numerous positions. Members of the TTP were said to have participated, although it remained unclear at the time whether their involvement was pre-planned or opportunistic. Pakistan responded decisively, mobilizing units near the border and engaging Afghan Taliban guard posts. At one point, Afghanistan attempted to impose a unilateral ceasefire while fighting was ongoing, but Pakistan rejected the offer, and hostilities continued until morning. Both sides then retreated to more defensible positions, leaving behind a scene of destruction that quickly became the subject of intense international dispute regarding casualties. The official reports from both sides presented wildly divergent accounts of the confrontation. According to the Afghan Taliban, their forces suffered only 9 fatalities and fewer than 18 injuries, yet claimed to have killed 58 Pakistani soldiers and captured 25 Pakistani outposts. Pakistan, in contrast, reported only 23 soldiers lost, but asserted that its forces had killed over 200 fighters from the Afghan Taliban and other groups, and claimed 21 of their own outposts. These figures are clearly irreconcilable, reflecting a historical pattern where both governments tend to obfuscate or minimize their own losses while exaggerating the damage inflicted upon adversaries. While Pakistan did release footage purportedly showing the destruction of Taliban outposts, these videos have yet to be independently verified. Following the intense violence of October 12, renewed fighting seemed inevitable, particularly as Pakistani leaders, including the Prime Minister, vowed strong retaliation. Afghan leaders echoed this defiant rhetoric, insisting that any further Pakistani aggression would be met with a strong response from Afghan forces. Pakistan subsequently closed all border crossings along the 2,600-kilometer frontier. Afghan sources reported drone strikes by Pakistan in Afghanistan's southern provinces, which continued the next day in Kandahar. A brief lull of just over 24 hours followed. However, in the late hours of October 14 into the 15th, Pakistan alleged that Afghan and Pakistani Taliban forces jointly opened fire, directing a barrage of bullets and heavy munitions into Pakistani territory. Pakistan reported no casualties from this engagement, describing it more as a show of force, to which it responded with mortar fire, claiming to have killed 20 more Taliban fighters. Just hours after this exchange, on the morning of October 15, the border region experienced its most severe phase of fighting yet. Intense cross-border fire erupted, with both Afghan and Pakistani fighters engaging each other from a distance, and reports of attempted infantry attacks on positions. In Pakistan, the border city of Chaman endured heavy shelling from across the border, resulting in civilian casualties. Pakistani drones targeted Afghan positions near the border, while airstrikes reportedly hit Afghan Taliban headquarters in Kandahar and repeatedly struck the capital city of Kabul. Videos emerged showing what appeared to be antique tanks under Afghan Taliban control moving towards the border, intending to reinforce an estimated 700 or more Taliban fighters who had arrived just before the hostilities escalated. Pakistan confirmed the loss of at least 7 Pakistani soldiers, while Afghanistan claimed at least 15 civilians killed and over 80 women and children wounded in the Spin Boldak district. On both sides, the true death toll is likely considerably higher, and initial assessments suggest Afghanistan sustained significant losses of heavy fighting equipment, including multiple tanks. Amidst the destruction, one small positive was the brevity of the fighting on the 15th. By late afternoon, both Pakistan and Afghanistan had agreed to a ceasefire, though it was a temporary measure, slated to expire on the afternoon of October 17 unless further extended. For the moment, however, the fighting had paused. While the immediate events leading to these border clashes have been outlined, a deeper understanding requires examining the broader context and the pattern of escalating tensions that have plagued Pakistan, Afghanistan, and the TTP for many years. The TTP has posed a significant security threat to Pakistan for over a decade, but the intensity of the conflict notably increased after Pakistan's former Prime Minister was removed from office in 2022. This former leader had overseen efforts to broker a ceasefire deal with the TTP, with the Afghan Taliban at times acting as mediators. However, his successors have favored a more punitive approach. In the current year, up to the end of September, Pakistani authorities have significantly broadened their crackdown against the TTP. The Islamabad-based Center for Research and Security Studies reported 2,414 deaths during that 9-month period. If these trends persist, the current year will prove to be far deadlier for Pakistan's anti-TTP operations than the previous one. The TTP bears substantial responsibility for this escalating death toll, having increased the frequency of suicide attacks, ambushes, and other assaults across the country, particularly in the northern regions. According to ACLED data, the TTP has launched over 600 attacks this year alone, averaging more than 2 per day, indicating their most active year in the past decade. Simultaneously, Pakistan's relationship with the Afghan Taliban has continued to deteriorate. A primary reason for this is Pakistan's intermittent airstrikes on Afghan soil, targeting what it asserts are TTP hideouts. The Afghan government consistently objects to these strikes. Until recently, Pakistan's operations typically did not lead to direct escalation because they avoided major population centers, especially Kabul. Despite Afghanistan's denials of supporting the TTP, its government remains highly hesitant to take decisive action against the group. Any such move would likely cause hardliners within the Afghan administration to side with the TTP, potentially causing internal divisions and leading fighters to drift towards more extreme factions, such as the Islamic State's Khorasan province, ISK, which would readily accept them. Pakistan's suspicions about the Afghan Taliban were further compounded on October 15 when, even as fighting flared, Afghanistan's foreign minister was on a significant trip to build diplomatic ties with India. The most pressing question now is whether these two nations can de-escalate tensions before the current ceasefire lapses. International mediators report that both Pakistan and Afghanistan have shown some willingness to reduce the violence, offering a cautious glimmer of optimism. However, if a more enduring ceasefire arrangement fails to materialize within the brief 48-hour window, a more concerning question arises: could this crisis spiral into an all-out war? Fortunately, there is some reassurance on this front. A full-scale conventional war is highly improbable. This isn't due to a lack of resolve on either side, but rather the significant limitations faced by the Afghan Taliban. While they captured a considerable amount of American-made military equipment during their 2021 takeover, they still lack the heavy armor, advanced aircraft, comprehensive intelligence gathering capabilities, and high-caliber combat forces required to wage a sustained conventional conflict. Pakistan, by contrast, commands the world's sixth-largest military by numbers alone. It possesses over 1,000 relatively advanced main battle tanks, thousands of individual artillery pieces, and nearly 400 operational combat jets, including American F-16s and Chinese J-10Cs. Should the Afghan Taliban attempt a conventional war against Pakistan, it would be a decisively unequal contest, a reality understood by both parties. However, this relative good news is limited, as the Afghan Taliban excels at a different kind of warfare, a chaotic, asymmetric style honed by decades of experience, most recently against the Americans and previously against the Soviets. Whether it is the Afghan Taliban or the TTP, their fighters thrive in classical insurgent warfare. Across large swathes of both Afghanistan and Pakistan, these fighters can blend seamlessly with the local ethnic Pashtun population, who move with relative freedom across the porous border regions. Afghanistan's forces cannot defeat Pakistan outright, but they can draw their more powerful neighbor into a protracted conflict, draining its resources and resolve. Exacerbating matters, this is precisely the kind of warfare that modern Pakistan struggles with most. The TTP poses a significant security threat across Pakistan, yet they are far from the only insurgent group Islamabad contends with. In the Balochistan region, ethnic Baloch separatists have proven incredibly resilient to Pakistani forces. The Islamic State also maintains a presence in Pakistan, and a myriad of anti-Pakistan militant groups operate in the disputed Kashmir region, alongside other ethnic and religious insurgencies that sporadically launch attacks. For a nation rightly regarded as a regional power, armed with a nuclear arsenal, Pakistan's internal security situation is remarkably precarious. This precariousness is magnified if the Afghan Taliban were to actively expand and fund the TTP insurgency. The question of whether Afghanistan would indeed take such a step remains open. In the immediate aftermath of the initial violence on October 12, most regional experts believed there was ample room for de-escalation and that the Afghan Taliban would pursue off-ramps from further hostilities. Now, however, these assessments are shifting. Pakistan's demonstrated willingness to strike Kabul with apparent impunity, and its signals that it may perceive little to fear from Afghanistan beyond limited border skirmishes, are altering perceptions. The conventional balance of power clearly favors Pakistan, but Afghanistan holds the choice: to accept the current order or to fundamentally alter the regional dynamic through scaled-up asymmetric warfare. There is one further element of potential fortune: the international community is broadly aligned in favoring Pakistan's stability while also being able to engage Afghanistan in dialogue. Major global powers, including China, Russia, the United States, and the European Union, all prefer a safe and stable Pakistan and strongly advocate for a negotiated resolution. China, with substantial material assets in both nations, consistently uses its leverage to protect its interests in international conflicts. The United States has a potential pretext to directly support Pakistan in a hypothetical effort to regain access to facilities like Bagram Air Base. Russia could threaten to reverse its reconciliation with Afghanistan, having been among the first nations to acknowledge the Taliban-controlled government. Saudi Arabia, which recently signed a mutual defense pact with Pakistan, would prefer not to invoke it so soon, especially against a fellow Muslim nation. The Afghan Taliban fully understands that, without the world's acquiescence, their current governance would be unsustainable. For its own survival, Afghanistan cannot afford to provide the international community with justification to back military operations aimed at dismantling its remaining arsenal. As events unfold, it is hoped that a clearer path towards an enduring peace will emerge between these two South Asian nations. However, at this juncture, Afghanistan and Pakistan remain locked in a perilous confrontation. The outcome is uncertain, and there are no guarantees that peace will ultimately prevail.